Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Norris, Senior Specialist in Methodology and Practice for the International Coalition of Historic Sites. I'm really happy to be joined today by Nathaniel Jue from the Chinese Historical Society of America. Before we dig in to learn more about his organization, a new member of the coalition, I just want to share for all of you who might not know the coalition but have come across this Facebook Live in some way, a little bit about who we are. The International Coalition of Sites of Conscience is the only global network of museums, historic sites, and memory initiatives that's dedicated to the idea that we can build a more just future by using the past. Our members, 330 or so, are in 67 countries around the world, and they range widely in the kind of work they do, but they are all brought together by this commitment to human rights and justice. And if you want to learn more about us or your organization is interested in membership, come find us at sitesofconscience.org. So, okay, Nathaniel, welcome. It's so nice to have you join us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Great. So let's begin. The Chinese Historical Society is a pretty old organization, not old, but well established. So tell me a little bit about its history and what you have done over the past and what you do now.
Sure. Yes. As you mentioned, we've been around, not forever, but we've been around since 1963, and we are located in San Francisco, Chinatown, which is a very important piece of our identity as the Chinese Historical Society of America. San Francisco is home to one of the largest Chinese American communities outside of Asia, and home to one of the first Chinatowns in the Western Hemisphere as a result of the California Gold Rush. So it is a very important piece of our identity is to represent San Francisco and the Greater Bay Area community. The Historical Society, we are a museum and learning center that collects and preserves the history of Chinese America through our exhibits and publications and public programming. And our mission is to promote the contributions and legacy of Chinese in America, to inspire a greater appreciation for and a knowledge of our Chinese American experience. And we are a museum and learning center. We have great programming and events that provide an opportunity to share our experiences.
Great. I'm really interested in your, how many years, 60 years, 50 years of collecting,
right.
Which is, right, often collecting, new organizations begin to collect and they can't figure it out. But I assume you must have some pretty interesting things in your decades of collecting. Share an object or two that's really meaningful to you.
Wow. I mean, as you can imagine, as a hub of artifacts, that we have so many, and I think it's important because the genesis of our origin story as a artifact museum, one of our founders back in the 40s and 50s, he was just sort of an avid collector of Chinese historical pieces. He would go to different abandoned Chinatowns and historical sites and mining gold mines out in the western part of America, and just randomly collect things. And for him, it was kind of this, Indiana Jones type of moment where it's like, these need to be in a museum. And that's kind of where the genesis of it began. And we have, so many different things from, old records from the 1930s, jazz records that infuse Chinese music and speak to Chinese Americans. We have obviously, old photographs and, deeds to different houses and stuff like that really represent, where we've come from as Chinese Americans. It's more than just, certain types of, there are different types of history that you can see that paint a picture through these different artifacts. So for me, it really is just a remarkable kind of trove that we have, everything from photographs and pamphlets and different advertising pieces from the 1920s and 40s, and it's really a broad kind of range that we have. That's really a remarkable picture of who we are.
And you talked about the kind of different threads of history. As you, and this may have changed over time in the organization, but as you think about what those materials you collect and your current work, the ways in which it speaks both to a Chinese American community, but to a broader community, right? And so how do you, partly, what is it that is important to convey about the Chinese American experience to both those groups? Kind of what's important that Chinese Americans take away from a visit to your institution, and then on the other hand, what's important for non-Chinese Americans, for other people to take away?
Sure, yeah. You know, I think for the Historical Society as a museum and learning center, it's really been this central safe space to understand, you know, the narrative of Chinese Americans. So we want for people of Chinese American descent to understand that this is a safe haven for us to sort of come together and activate and engage about our culture, our background, our heritage, and you know, during this really difficult time within our society, to kind of have that opportunity to be empowered about your heritage, be empowered about where we've come from. And obviously for folks outside of the Chinese American community to really understand, you know, the contributions that we've made and the influence that we've had within the greater American landscape. You know, we've done a lot of different things that have contributed. And so it's better to understand how we are different, to accept our differences so that we can, you know, kind of unify and come together to understand each other's backstories, if you will.
Great. Thanks so much. That was a great explanation. And I just wanted to follow up, as you talk about a difficult time, right? The rise in violence against Asian American and Pacific Islanders over the last year has been significant. I think most of us, at least here in the US, have read about it. Can you talk about how that's impacted your community, but also ways in which the museum can be helpful in that setting, within this experiences?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, the pandemic has kind of, you know, affected all of us in many different ways. And for Asian American community, Chinese community in particular, it's brought on a lot of different challenges, as you can understand. And so again, speaking to that safe space that we provide, you know, we do want to allow through our programming and through our group gatherings and event, you know, volunteerism and just that community service to our audiences, that this is a safe place for us to have those dialogues. And, you know, we kind of take this time, as difficult as it is, as a great learning opportunity to know that, you know, there are different events in history that are kind of similar that we've overcome. You know, we've had things surrounding the Chinese Exclusion Act and obviously the Civil Rights era. There are moments where Chinese Americans were, you know, very absent in society and kind of overlooked during a certain part of segregation. And so what have we learned from those moments? We take a lot of different time periods and kind of compare them to what we're facing right now and try to have a better understanding and appreciation for where we've come from through those experiences, and how can we kind of better learn and better apply that to what we're going through as a greater society together.
That's great. Such a great explanation of why history matters, right? All those things that have happened before. For people who don't know, and there may be people, I'm going to ask you to explain the Chinese Exclusion Act. You know, however, not detailed, but tell me, make sure people understand what that is.
Right. I may not have the best sort of academic response for that, but obviously there was a time during the latter part of the 19th century where there was a tremendous amount of influx in Chinese immigration as a result of our Chinese American pursuit of the American dream. We came here during the California Gold Rush and right thereafter during the, you know, after slavery ended, where there's a lot of opportunity for us to help build America literally shaping the Western United States with the Transcontinental Railroad. And I guess, there's a difficult time for American residents here to realize that, yeah, we were working for cheap labor, or working as cheap labor. We were kind of taking jobs away. And there was a large opinion that, immigration from the East really needed to stop. And that was kind of what initiated this idea of this, a law that was passed to exclude, there was a cap on Chinese immigration, and then ultimately there was, sort of no one was allowed to come in. And so that really affected the population of immigrants from the East. And that was really based on sort of that moment in time in American history.
Thanks. It's just really, I think, good to always kind of share terms. And again, it's something that absolutely has other historical resonances today as the US thinks about immigration. So it's great to understand it. Tell me a little bit about upcoming programs or exhibitions you have at the museum. What's upcoming?
Right. Yeah. As you mentioned, during this pandemic, we've had an opportunity to kind of not necessarily pivot, but really hone in on different ways that the Asian American, Chinese Americans have contributed to society as a whole. Before, a lot of our programs were kind of sort of like self-directed, where like most of the conversation was about what we have done to impact American society. Now we've had an opportunity to kind of showcase how we've contributed to intersectionality and the bringing together of cultures from different backgrounds, whether it's LGBT, African-American segments, and whatnot. And so a lot of our programming is kind of centered on how we can unify different communities through our own Chinese American experiences. We have an upcoming exhibit in February called We Are Bruce Lee, and it's centered on, surprise, Bruce Lee, Chinese American icon, who was known as obviously a martial artist and actor, but we are hoping to portray him and showcase him as sort of a unifier, because he was, part of his backstory is that he was shunned by a lot of his martial arts peers because he taught Kung Fu to non-Chinese students. And he said, no, this is something that should be shared with everyone. It's not only for Chinese Americans. And so that's kind of the birth of this idea, is that, Bruce Lee is a unifier. He's revered by all different walks of life and different backgrounds of people. And so that's something that we hope to showcase through this event that's coming up in February.
Great. That sounds like a wonderful project and such an interesting approach to kind of say, yeah, this is his part of a story that most people probably never kind of think about.
Right. Yeah. He has a very colorful history. He wasn't around that long, but he did obviously impact a lot of people in different ways that I hope we are able to shed light on through this exhibit. Great.
Anything? So is all your programming now mostly virtual, or have you been able to reopen?
Right. Yeah. In San Francisco, for the longest time, we were abiding by a lot of rules and regulations there. So we have been virtual for, since the pandemic has started. But recently we've been preparing for, being in-person types of activities. But yeah, for now, we've done a lot of virtual stuff, which has really been great. It does allow us to actually reach a broader audience. We're located in Chinatown, San Francisco. We kind of leverage our community and the people in the Bay Area as our audience, but with virtual programming, we are very, very excited to expand that reach to, people outside who can't physically come to our museum space. So for now, we're really just going with the flow, as everyone else is.
Right, just trying to figure it out as we go along.
But silver lining, we are reaching a lot of different audiences that, would otherwise we wouldn't. So we're taking advantage of that opportunity.
Great. I was so interested at the start when you talked about being in Chinatown as a kind of core part of the museum's identity, the kind of place where you are. And I'm always curious about how places change. So I assume Chinatown has changed over time.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that. Just about how it's changed and what's different now.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a really great thing to point out. Chinatown in general across the United States have kind of had different evolutions and shapes of their identity and their makeup. And so San Francisco's Chinatown is one of the few that are still sort of thriving. And it's largely because it still is relevant to the residents that live there. The residents, really depend on Chinatown as that source of identity and culture and home. And so, but like you said, it is still changing. And so we as an organization recognize that we do need to kind of go with that flow as well. The makeup of our residents in Chinatown changes over time, the needs, the businesses have changed, but we still are there, and we need to kind of evolve in that way too, to respond to our community and their needs and who they are. So we've been trying to take advantage of that as well. We know that there's a different way for us to bring different types of programming to our community, and that's something that we are very excited to evolve with our neighborhood. That's part of.
And does that mean also, so kind of two more questions about your neighborhood. One, is gentrification an issue there? Is that something happening? And I haven't been in San Francisco's Chinatown in a while, so you're going to have to help me with this. Is gentrification part of the issue?
A little bit, yes, of course. I wouldn't say overtly that it's so rapidly changing or whatnot. It's not as radical of a button push at the moment, but of course within every Chinatown and ethnic enclave community, that is something that's always at the back of minds, and it's changing in a way that gentrifying in a little way, of course, but it's not something that's really a really gigantic kind of
right. And is
movement.
the other change just a more diverse population among Asian Americans, that not just Chinese, but Vietnamese or Malay, is that also a changing difference?
Not overtly, maybe not, so obviously. I mean, again, as I mentioned, yes, the dynamic of our community is different, whereas we had, Chinatown by its history has been a center for a lot of different types of certain type of immigrant. We do have now immigrants that come here that don't have the same needs of Chinatown as they used to. So they're more affluent, or they're more educated, or they're bilingual,
okay,
or what have you. And so that's a little bit of a nuance that might be contributing to the different makeup of the demographic of our community. But as far as like businesses and culture, we are experiencing, yes, of course, there are different businesses. There are more high-end Chinatown restaurants that are sort of bringing different types of people into the community. It's not necessarily serving ourselves. It is mostly an opportunity to say, hey, look, there are really great contemporary things about Chinatown in our community, and we're welcoming you through modernized cuisine, or different types of retail space or what have you. So that's kind of the approach that I think is happening as Chinatown kind of evolves.
So has the Historic Society been able to undertake kind of contemporary documentation projects? As you talk about a changing Chinatown, right? I can kind of see that things that used to be are maybe not going to be 10 years from now. Do you do that kind of work?
Well, we really do try to leverage like the institutions and the landmarks and the pieces that make up Chinatown, for the past 100 and 150 years. And so the documentation that we have is in a way, you're right. Yeah, we like to showcase like this was a building that's been here since 1950. 27. This was named after a San Francisco supervisor from 1964 or what have you. So we do like to showcase through our social media and other communications channels that, you know, these are these important landmarks and here's the history behind them. Not necessarily to prepare for them not being there anymore per se.
Right.
But as just a you know, sort of a DYK, like, did you know that this is here for a reason? Like, here's the story behind this. Not many people understand that Chinatown itself, in San Francisco in particular, has a lot of, you know, really rich history. These buildings have been there for 150 years. So those are the types of moments that we want to capture.
So I want to make sure that people know how to find you on social media. We'll tag you on Facebook, of course, but what's the museum's Instagram? How do we find you there?
Yes, Instagram, where we have a lot of great content. As you can imagine with museums, there's different things that we're able to showcase through our artifacts and our events. You can find us at CHSA Museum is our handle. And that's across all of our channels, Facebook and Twitter as well.
Great, super, because I know people are gonna wanna go look. So as you think about, you know, as we talk at Sites of Conscience about thinking about museums and human rights and what our role is, and I come from the museum world as well, do you think in the future that there'll be a need for kind of more specific actions around human rights that expand beyond the safe space that's so important to provide for people? But do you envision other concerns to the Chinese American community that you're particularly going to want to pay attention to?
I mean, you know, I think with our program, we're always going to be that kind of voice box. And we do recognize that, yeah, there are different types of topics that will arise and are continuously arising, just as we've seen in the past year and a half, just from unexpected things that we
right. It's hard to predict, for sure.
Right. But we do want to kind of encourage this outside of the box thinking that, you know, everything does impact us together, you know, like whether it's something, for example, like climate change, you know, we in America like are really aware of it. Not to say that no one else is outside of the US, but is there a perspective that Chinese Americans can take on something like climate change, on something like, you know, as you mentioned before, civil rights and social justice, that really is more of a global concern that we all kind of need to be aware of, not just for our own selves and our own community. So we do have some upcoming programming that's centered on, as I mentioned, Chinese Americans and climate change. You know, how can we kind of be involved in those types of conversations as well?
Wow, that's really great. And I think your overall approach really focusing on the idea of intersectionality and all of these issues, because they do, of course, intersect, right, is really interesting. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask you if there's one, I'm sure if I ask you about a movie, you're going to send me to a Bruce Lee movie, but I'm going to ask you if there's one book somebody wanted to read to get, fiction or nonfiction, I'll take either one, to get a sense of Chinatown in San Francisco, Chinese Americans in the US. What book really resonates for you that you would send us to?
That's a great question. We have a lot of great books in our bookshop that speak to, obviously, Chinese American history. We recently, the one that I just mentioned about the origin of CHSA, one of the founders was an artifact collector. We just did a presentation on his life. There was a book on his life called Mr. Chinatown, The Legacy of H.K. Wong. We just did a book talk about his life 3 weeks ago or something. And it speaks to how he, like, this guy was the multi-hyphenate, or the original multi-hyphenate. He was a restaurateur. He was involved in the Chinatown press. He founded the San Francisco Chinese New Year Parade, which is one of the largest Chinese New Year celebrations in North America. And he was one of the founders of CHSA, it was just a really eye-opening experience, book to understand this guy's life, and how he shaped the Chinatown that we know of today, and that we as San Franciscans revere and understand. So it's just very timely that you brought that up, that we just did a presentation about a book about his life a few weeks ago. So that's something.
Oh, that's great. It's so interesting that this person who is just so engaged in civic life, right? That's
Right.
as you describe him.
Exactly.
And that description of him, like going out to old gold mine towns and everything, super interesting. So
it's a very colorful life, and you just kind of take for granted how one person can kind of shape, a community. And so that's sort of the reason why we wanted to highlight his life.
Nice. That's great. So as we wrap up, any final things you want to share that I haven't thought to ask you? Any final thoughts?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you, and we're very excited to be a part of this network. We share very overlapping ideals, and the mission of your organization is really something to be admired, and so we're really excited about this opportunity to work with you.
Great. So we are really excited to begin to engage you more and begin to kind of dive in to learn more about you as well. So thanks so much for joining us, Nathan. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it being here.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.